especially in the last like half millennia, something new has happened around the world. And that is that we are starting to see glimpses of the possibility that maybe we can transform our world, we can transform our culture. And, because in a lot of places, either the culture wasn't so out of balance that people didn't feel a great need for that, or it was out of balance, but it was so deeply entrenched in negativity, there was no hope at that time. You couldn't be like a priest or a nun or a yogi or a visionary, a mystic, a poet or whatever, and then say, and I'm going to go out there in the streets and I'm going to, no, you'd be beheaded or something. So you just need to be quiet and just maybe work behind the scenes or do your work on yourself. And in the last several hundred years, even though we've had the Inquisition and things like that, slowly hope has been coming, and we start to see a greater amount of democracy. We see a greater equality in the genders. We're moving away from slavery and starting to work more consciously with racial issues and so on and so forth. Our medicine has been improving. There's a lot of reasons why people have felt like gradually over the last several centuries, maybe we can change our world. Maybe there's hope. But one of the sort of backlash reactions that many people, I think, that were like that, for not just in the modern New Age kind of period of the last century, but even going back centuries, a part of what we're also coming to terms with is, as we go deeper into really individually learning about what enlightenment really is, what virtue really is, how hard it is to transform ourselves individually, we're starting to recognize more and more that actually the degree to which humanity is embroiled in not only a lack of character, frankly, just not being very virtuous, but also heavy karma, a lot of pain and challenge from historically from thousands of years of being crazy human beings that we are, is that sadly, it's not that easy to change. And, we've made, for instance, a lot of growth around racism. And now we're having a backlash reaction, and there's racist issues flaring up all around the world, certainly in the United States. So I think part of what we're discovering is maybe we can work on ourselves, and we can work to do what we can to contribute to the world, but we have to adjust our idealism and our expectations to what's really possible. Let's be realistic about the karmic situation and the actual condition of humanity, and adjust our expectations accordingly. And I think one of the things, as you were pointing out, there's a lot of difficult, just to use the Middle East as a point of focus. That stuff's ancient. You were even referencing that perhaps with a deep esoteric point of view, we can trace it beyond the planet or into more ancient times, other cycles, other worlds. There's deep stuff there. So a lot of really what happens, what I've noticed more and more in this life as I've deepened in my own, understanding, is the great sages that I know of and have the fortune to be in contact with, they have this very, very ancient perspective where they look out on samsara, they look out on a planet or a current human civilization with this very expansive ancient understanding. And they balance these two extraordinary qualities. One is that they're very compassionate, they're engaged, they're grounded, they're very present to the world, and they care and they serve. And the other is they have this vast sense of equanimity and a deep, sobered wisdom about how profound samsara is, how much substance there is to the ignorance in samsara, and how hard it is for it to change. So they don't look out at when I look at these great souls like Sri Guru Babaji, for instance, I don't find that they have a kind of ungrounded idealism or hope of what can change. They're just looking in a very sobered way. Yeah, this is business as usual. But because souls are intended, people come to this environment to stir up their issues and confront things and kind of muck around in the craziness of samsara and learn and awaken through that. and people are at different stages. So some percentage of the population is ripe for some significant awakening, but a big percentage of the population, they need to go through exactly what they're going through. They need to go through all the craziness of the kinds of struggles, the wars, the great injustices and everything. That's karmically that's where they're learning. And it's not gonna, they're not in that life gonna suddenly wake up out of that and be ready for, if they're in 6th grade, they're not gonna jump to graduating from high school in that lifetime. They're in 6th grade, they maybe get to the later stages of 6th grade, and maybe they'll get to 7th grade. And that's not gonna make them not be still part of that problem. They're working their way along, learning their lessons at a slow, unconscious level. Some rare people will have some kind of, deep disillusionment with the whole thing in the middle of a life and shift out of that. But those are older souls. That's, So I think a profound part of what's very challenging in our times is just coming to terms with accepting the reality that there are large sections of humanity that neither are very virtuous, they're not older souls, they have heavy karma, and they're not ripe for deep awakening. So we can work to create as much education and as much context to try to influence politics or education and so on, the arts, to try to support collective evolution, but we have to adjust our expectations to what's possible, and an easy resolution of something like the Middle East issues is, I don't see that happening. It's just a long, drawn out, challenging thing. And if something wonderful happens in the next decades or something, that would be great, but I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't. Those are deeply entrenched issues. Same with other places like the United States. These issues are ongoing. And here we have a little blurb of moving forward, and already we're seeing like strong counter reactions to that, and who knows where it will all end up. But I do have a deep belief and faith in the underlying value of the whole journey. It all serves collective evolution, collective awakening, even if it doesn't show outwardly as what our idealism would hope for, like a reborn civilization that's more healthier, where nations are cooperative, religions are more cooperative, and so on. It's a hard road to that, and we've made progress, but I don't think we're sort of, right on the precipice of some dramatic change in that area. Unfortunately, it's a slow, gradual process. So let me just, I'm sure there's more to that, Reen, but I'll pause there. You're welcome. And I think I saw in the chat box a couple of comments, a question from Lloyd. Don't people just finally get to the point of being completely tired of it all? Absolutely. They are suffering terribly. Absolutely. And I guess I kind of just addressed that, Tamara, in the sense that a big part of, I think, what spiritual awakening is and why it takes a while. A lot of people go through many lives as human beings, and then they had an evolution before they were human. Why is this taking so long? Well, one of the reasons why is that people just need to get tired of it all. They need to get disillusioned with samsara. They need to have enough experiences to begin to make contact with alternate possibilities. If they just get disillusioned, but there's no alternative, then there's just despair. So they have to the soul needs to both somehow grow in a recognition of the value of wisdom and virtue and awakening on the one hand, and become disillusioned with samsara consciousness, with dualism and separation and suffering that comes from that. And that's what's sort of a kind of shocking revelation to a lot of us on the spiritual path is it is not easy to get this into our bones, that we're just tired of this. Even when a part of us gets it, other parts stay with that for decades and even centuries after we initially awaken, and some deeper part of us is on the path. And that's part of why it's so important to have a middle path, both in terms of towards ourselves and humanity as a whole and samsara as a whole, is because It's a gradual and slow and painstaking process, and it takes a while to really just become disillusioned. And I feel that, you know, hundreds of millions of people are making serious growth right now, but that's hundreds of millions out of billions. It's not the majority. Majority are at different stages of their evolution. But they too, you don't have to, in order to awaken, you can get disillusioned with, you know, phase C and move on to phase D. And that D might be still several steps away from being deeply and consciously on a profound path, but it's still growth. You've become disillusioned with C and you're moving on to D, and that's great. So if we can adjust our idealism and our hopes and our expectations to just looking at where a particular individual or a group or humanity as a whole is at, then we can actually see the growth that's happening. And it is happening. We can appreciate, we can see light coming out of humanity. In the soul of humanity, light's growing right now. It's just not turning into a healing and transformation to the level we'd hope outwardly, but it is happening. But if you make a standard here and say it's not, people aren't growing unless they've achieved this level, then we'll always miss what's going on. Well, we won't recognize that evolution is happening for everybody, but regardless of the stage they're at. People are in the process of gaining experience, and deep in their souls, they're figuring things out. And gradually some of that's coming out. You can see the signs of it in their personalities. That we somehow collectively got to the point where we've, to some significant extent, overcome something as simple as slavery. 200 years ago, we didn't have that yet. Now we do. That's collective growth. To me, overcoming something as simple as slavery is still a far cry from a profoundly spiritual civilization. But it's growth. It's what humans were ready for. We weren't ready for a pervasive planetary civilization just yet, spiritual civilization. But we were ready to overcome slavery, and it's still, you know, we're working out the finer details of that still. But, you know, that's sobering to remember that that was only 150 years ago that we figured that out, or, you know, give or take, depending on the country. So that's where we're at. And it's, if we accept that, then it is inspiring to say, there's great changes happening for people where they're at, in a place that can be acknowledged for what's right for them to be figuring out. It's just, unfortunately, to our spiritual idealists, not collectively adding up into a radical planetary transformation right now in a deeply spiritual way. Although if you can go to the soul plane and attune to the soul of humanity, it's luminous right now. There's dramatic change happening on that level. It is truly, in a sense, a profound new age is happening on the planet right now. It's just not happening on the physical plane the way we might have hoped when we were more idealistic. But it is happening. If you can, when you leave incarnation, you'll see, or if you can go into some deeper state, even go out of the body and function in certain dimensions of it, there's a great sort of vitality, coupled with a great amount of compassion. That's a difficult process. But it's also luminous. It's also bearing profound fruits in the soul of humanity right now.